no-go poll. And the 3 NASA astronauts and 1 cosmonaut are in Dragon Endeavour. They're still docked to the International Space Station. We expect the undocking to take place at about 4:05 p.m. Central, 5:05 p.m. Eastern. We will wait for that go, no-go poll.
Dragon SpaceX on the Big Loop. Final reconfigurations for undock are complete and nominal. Houston and Hawthorne teams have pulled go for undock at 2100 and separation at 2105. At this time, can you confirm crew readiness for undock?
And we are go for undock visors closed.
Okay, copy all.
Perfect, and that go, no-go poll that we've been looking for has been completed. So we'll continue to be in joint operations until the spacecraft has entered the approach ellipsoid. That's the 2 by 2 by 4 kilometer sphere around the International Space Station that teams use to monitor arriving and departing spacecraft. So over the last 8 months, CREW-8 has had what I like to call a astronaut's eye view from the space station. They've had an opportunity to capture some pretty amazing views from low Earth orbit. One of the photos that we got was with the space station being about 250 miles above Earth. They're too far away to make things out like cars, people, or buildings, but what they can see are other landmarks around the world. And the long camera lenses they use help zoom in on familiar sights from our home planet. On September 19th, the crew captured a celestial sight with comet C-2023-A3 rising through the atmospheric edge towards the sun. The crew had been watching the tail structure evolve over the last little while. And here's another long exposure shot. This was taken on August 11th above the Indian Oceans as star glitter from above. Such a beautiful aurora. And now finally, another iconic shot of the Italian peninsula, or what many of us know as the Boot of Italy, taken on August 1st. Of course, we get satellites collect imagery of Earth too, but the International Space Station is unique in viewing these opportunities because astronauts and cosmonauts can tell scientists on the ground what they are observing and what stands out in real time. So they'll have a few more opportunities to take in those views during their flight home as we prepare for undocking coming up here at about 4:05 p.m. Central, 2:05 p.m. Pacific. But in the meantime, I'm going to toss it back over to you, Jesse and Sandra and Hawthorne.
Awesome. Thanks, Nilüfer. Separation is set for approximately 2:05 p.m. Pacific time or 5:05 p.m. Eastern time, which is just under 8 minutes from now. At the moment, Dragon is in its final configuration before undocking, and we are waiting for mission operators. They've already completed their go, no-go poll, but they will call out if we will be moving forward with the undocking procedure shortly.
And as we mentioned earlier, just like during its approach to the space station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is designed to be fully autonomous, which requires no action from the crew on board. Departure is typically a little bit faster and sometimes easier since the crew doesn't have to stop at any waypoints like we see when a spacecraft arrives.
Once the undocking sequence is complete, Dragon will use its Draco thrusters to move away from the station in a series of 4 departure burns, which are carefully choreographed maneuvers that will increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. And then from there, a phasing burn will place Dragon on a trajectory to align it with the splashdown site.
And so we did hear that go, no-go poll earlier. Everyone polled go. That is just a time for everyone on the ground as well as the crew on board Dragon to ensure things are in place. All systems are go, as the name suggests, for the undocking, which again, we are targeting just about 7 minutes from now. Now, at the moment, the crew is suited up as they are during a dynamic phase of the flight. We might hear a call out for the crew to also put their visors down ahead of the actual undocking itself. Teams work together to ensure everyone is ready to support undocking. And so again, that poll was one final check-in, and we did get the go for undocking today. So again, following that confirmation that Dragon is go to undock, we are now waiting for the undocking sequence to begin. Once that happens, it will take less than 5 minutes for Dragon to separate from the International Space Station, which has been its home for the last 7 months.
At the planned undock time, SpaceX Mission Control will command the undock sequence start, which begins the automatic undocking process. Now, the first step is for the umbilicals to retract. These umbilicals connect Dragon systems to the space station, transferring power, telemetry.
Undock sequence commanded.
Second.
Complete, Dragon will unlatch itself from the space station by releasing the 12 hard capture hooks in 2 separate phases. All that combined will take about 4.5 minutes, and then Dragon will be ready to depart the space station and begin.
Umbilical demate complete and nominal.
Views throughout the broadcast towards the end once we get past that time period. So Dragon's initial departure from the International Space Station is a little different from other docked spacecraft like the Soyuz, which rely on springs to push them away from the docking port. Dragon will execute 2 short thruster firings to undock using a combination of the 12 Draco thrusters around the base of the spacecraft, with the first 2 breaking any stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and the second slowly backing the spacecraft away. We're expecting that call for the undocking sequence. Well, we actually did hear that call for the undocking sequence already, so we're well underway here and expecting the actual physical separation to occur in 4 minutes at 2:05 p.m. Pacific.
Yeah, and with Dragon getting ready for undocking, let's go back to Nilüfer in Mission Control at Johnson Space Center to take us through undocking.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Sandra. So we just heard that we are going through the undocking commands, and they have been sent up. So we'll take a look at the umbilical retraction as that is ready. That should probably take just about a few minutes. Once the umbilical hook is disconnected, Dragon will be relying entirely on its own power sources from batteries generated through solar cells instead of taking power and telemetry from the space station. On console today, we have Flight Director Paul Kanya that is managing the room here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Perfect, and we just heard the call out of the first set of hooks being opened. We'll now look for the umbilical retraction and look for 2 sets of 6 hooks. So this is going to be this. Again, the first set of hooks have begun to open, and there are 2 sets of hooks with 6 each, for a total of 12 hooks in all that will be open today. So as we await confirmation, there on your screen you see, as I mentioned, Flight Director Paul Kanya, and beside him Capcom, which is Neil Nagata today. They are the primary folks in Mission Control Houston here, communicating with the crew where necessary.
All hooks open.
Perfect. That was the call we were waiting for, with all 12 hooks now open. Next up, Dragon will execute a short burn just before separation. And there was the call we were waiting for. This is a combination of
Endeavor departing, fair winds and falling seas, and Miyaki Pasaki, my friends.
Come on, Dragon. The circle will never be the same without you.
crew members departing space station right now.
Dragon, it's been an absolute pleasure to serve aboard the space station and stand to watch. It's in great hands. Godspeed.
Joe, you'll never guess what I found.
So next up, Dragon will execute.
Roger.
Thank you.
So Dragon, as I've been trying to say, will execute a short burn just before separation using a combination of its 12 Draco engines around the base of the spacecraft.
I never did get Dragon away.
This will break any stiction between Dragon and the docking port. And then a second burn will help the spacecraft slowly start backing away. We have a fantastic view of a Dragon coming in.
Dragon SpaceX late call, depart burn 0 was nominal.
Perfect, and we've just received confirmation of the nominal burn that just took place. It's a very short burn using the service section of the Draco thrusters to break some stiction from Dragon and the International Space Station. All right, we have confirmed separation here at 4:05 p.m. Central, 2:05 p.m. Pacific, as the International Space Station and Dragon were flying approximately 260 statute miles over the Pacific. That means that Matt, Mike, Jeanette, and Alexander had completed their journey aboard the International Space Station, wrapping up over 230 days on the orbital outpost as they splashed down off the coast of Florida early Friday morning. At this time, the crew are all suited up in their seats, and they'll have an opportunity to get out of those suits in a short little while and prepare for their longer ride home. Here in Mission Control Houston, the team will continue to monitor the departure of Dragon as it exits the approach ellipsoid. Again, that approach ellipsoid is a 2 by 2 by 4 kilometer sphere that monitors arriving and departing spacecraft.
Delay, my last Dragon delay was confirmed.
Roger that.
Perfect. We continue to confirm nominal burns that are taking place as Dragon continues to depart the International Space Station. As we continue to monitor here jointly, on the right side of your screen,
nominal,
you will see...
And Dragon, at this time, your go to DOF suits in 4.012. And I've got another reminder here that the big loop will be deactivated following Dragon's exit from the approach ellipsoid.
Please go for 4.01.
So we have a nominal depart burn lasting approximately 16 seconds. And the team continues to monitor the departure of Dragon as it exits the approach ellipsoid, the 2 by 2 by 4 kilometer sphere. The two invisible boundaries around the International Space Station are the approach ellipsoid and the keep out sphere. So these are the spaces where they monitor the arriving and departing spacecraft, and we are currently standing by for the next burn. And with that, we're just minutes away from the next burn, but we are going to pass it over as we stand by in mission control to our teams in Hawthorne, Jesse and Sandra. Back over to you as we continue to walk you through this process.
And we've got a lot of action going on, and we've got some really cool views from the International Space Station looking at Dragon Endeavour as it's moving further and further away from the International Space Station. We had burn 0 and departure burn 1 already completed. That departure burn 1 is creating more and more distance between the International Space Station and Dragon, and allowing Dragon to exit that keep-out sphere, as Nilofer mentioned. And again, some really cool views there.
Station Easton on the big loop. Endeavor's exited the keep-out sphere. Break for Endeavor. Godspeed. We'll see you all in just a little bit.
Neil.
And on your screen,
travel spreads.
You're continuing to see a view of Dragon following its undocking from the International Space Station at 2:05 p.m. while flying over the Pacific Ocean, approaching the western tip of South America. Now, we did just get word that Dragon has exited the keep-out sphere. You might have even seen some of those thruster firings on your screen as we got that call out. The keep-out sphere is an imaginary sphere or boundary that's 200 meters in radius around the space station. It's one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting vehicles either arriving or departing the International Space Station, and you can continue to see these great views of Dragon as it departs the space station, slowly backing away. Now, before moving into the keep-out sphere, all of the spacecraft have to be configured where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if for some reason the spacecraft lost all maneuvering. But again, we don't expect that to occur today.
We're now waiting for Dragon to exit the approach ellipsoid, or the AE, which is another imaginary sphere. This time it's a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers in the same family as the keep-out sphere. Now, one of the key differences with the AE is that vehicles outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. Now, that means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, again, even if it lost all maneuvering for that call out once we hear confirmation that Dragon is outside of that AE.
So to recap today a little bit, the hatches between the International Space Station and Dragon Endeavour were closed earlier at 12:24 p.m. Pacific. Since then, the crew has settled in to begin their 34-hour journey back to Earth following their undocking at 2:05 p.m. But prior to that, the joint NASA and SpaceX teams pulled go to proceed with undock. The undock command was then sent at 2 p.m. followed...
SpaceX Dragon to ground, cabin mic check.
Got you loud and clear on the cabin mic. Good comm check on Dragon to ground.
Awesome, thank you so much.
And you did hear some communications about a mic check between the ground and Dragon Endeavour. This is taking place because once Dragon exits the approach ellipsoid, the big loop will be deconfigured. The big loop is that integrated loop between Mission Control Houston, Mission Control Hawthorne, the International Space Station, and Crew Dragon Endeavour. But now that Dragon has departed the International Space Station, all those folks don't need to be in the same comms loop anymore, so they're working to deconfigure that as soon as we get out of the approach ellipsoid. So just working through some of those steps a little bit, as you heard. Now, after the umbilicals were retracted just a few minutes ago and those hooks were opened, we did see physical separation take place at 2:05 p.m. Pacific while Dragon was flying over the Pacific Ocean, approaching the western tip of South Africa. Dragon then completed 2 of 4 departure burns and exited the keep-out sphere. And we're now just a couple minutes away from Dragon crossing through that approach ellipsoid point to set the spacecraft and CREW-8 up for their path back to Earth. Again, Dragon is targeting to splash down off the coast of Florida, and there you see another great view of it. Our Cronus flight controller and Mission Control Houston continuing to angle the camera so that we can keep a bird's eye view or an International Space Station eye view on Dragon as it continues to depart further and further away. But again, Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Florida at 3:29 a.m. Eastern, 12:29 a.m. Pacific on Friday, October 25th, which will mark the completion of its 7-month science mission. And so, again, we are continuing to get those great views. Perhaps if it comes into focus a little more, you might be able to make out those thruster firings. But if you look at the very tip of Dragon, that's the nose cone, and it has remained open since Dragon launched all the way back in March. It remains open throughout the duration of docked operations and will remain open during these phasing hours as well, but it will be closed before we proceed to splash down in the deorbit burn. And we'll be covering all of that more in our splashdown broadcast, but just a little preview of what's to come.
So if you're just now joining us, you are tuned into You are tuned into the CREW-8 departure from the International Space Station. The crew has actually already departed the International Space Station. We've already completed the unlatching of the umbilicals and hooks, hard capture hooks that mate Dragon to the International Space Station. We've completed burn 0 and departure burn 1, and the vehicle with the 4 crew members inside are now moving further and further away from the International Space Station.
É daqui a pouco, gente, que o foguete do Elon Musk vai ser lançado, gente. Daqui a pouco.
Again, this is to keep the crew safe. There's a number of choreographed maneuvers that the Dragon spacecraft has to do to make sure that it can safely depart away from the International Space Station, and then it will soon begin maneuvers over the course of the next 30 hours or so to make its way back down to Earth.
And with CREW-8 now undocked from the International Space Station and on their way towards that targeted splashdown off the coast of Florida on Friday morning, let's take a moment to learn a little bit more about the crew we're bringing home. Commander Matt Dominic was born and raised in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, and is married to Faith Dominic, and they have 2 daughters. Matt earned a Master of Science degree in Systems Engineering from the Naval Postgraduate School, and he was designated as a naval aviator in 2007. Matt has made 2 deployments to the North Arabian Sea, has flown close air support missions in support of Operation Enduring Freedom, and he has more than 1,600 hours of flight time in 28 different aircraft, as well as 400 carrier-assisted landings and 61 combat missions. This was his first space flight.
Dr. Michael R. Barrett, CREW-8's pilot, was selected by NASA in 2000.
He's
the only member of the crew of CREW-8 who's been in space before, as part of Expedition 19 and 20 in 2009 and STS-133 in 2011. Before CREW-8, he spent 212 days in space. He is board certified in internal and aerospace medicine and has been awarded numerous times for his contributions to space medicine research. Michael lives in League City, Texas with his wife Michelle and their 5 children. And personal and recreational interests include sailing, boat restoration, writing, and cooking good food in harsh or remote places.
And next up is Jeanette Epps. This was Mission Specialist Jeanette Epps' very first space flight. She's a Syracuse, New York native and was a NASA fellow during graduate school. She then worked for the Ford Motor Company, where she received a U.S. patent for her research into auto collisions and countermeasure systems. After leaving Ford, she joined the Central Intelligence Agency, or CIA, for 7 years, where she worked as a technical intelligence officer before she became an astronaut in 2009. She has a Master of Science and Doctorate of Philosophy in Aerospace Engineering, and she's also a twin.
And mission specialist Alexander Grabankin was also a first-time flyer for this mission. He graduated from the Irkutsk Military Aerospace Engineering Institute in 2002, majoring in the engineering, maintenance, and repair of aircraft radio navigation systems. He then attended the Moscow Technical University of Communications and Informatics, graduating with a degree in radio communications, broadcasting, and television. He was accepted into the Cosmonaut Corps in 2018 and served as a flight engineer while on board the International Space Station. And that is your CREW-8 crew, who is currently making their way back down to Earth. And we're going to hand it over to JSC with Nilüfer. How's it going?
Hey, it's going well, Jesse. Thanks so much, both you and Sandra. So here in Mission Control Houston, in the International Space Station's Flight Control Room, teams are continuing to monitor joint operations of Dragon as we exit the approach ellipsoid. Again, that's the 2 by 2 by 4 kilometer sphere around the International Space Station that teams use to monitor arriving and departing spacecraft. The live view of Dragon departing, it became a little tiny blip on your screen here that you can see, but we see Dragon headed home as our CREW-8 crew splashed down off the coast of Florida early Friday morning. NASA astronauts Commander Matt Dominic, pilot Mike Barrett, mission specialist Jeanette Epps, alongside Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gurbankin, conducted several science experiments and technology demonstrations over the course of their 3,776 orbits of Earth. The space station is our orbiting laboratory where crew conduct all kinds of science and demonstrate technologies for the benefit of humanity. So here in Mission Control, the ground team works with the crew to conduct this science, and the researchers from all over the world have science on the space station. Over 200 experiments were worked on during CREW-8's time on orbit. And NASA astronaut Jeanette Epps spent some of her time extracting DNA for the genomic enumeration of antibiotic resistance in space experiment. So this experiment surveys the station and the antibiotic-resistant organisms and sequences their DNA to examine adaptations to space. And the results from this investigation could support development of measures to protect astronauts and people in buildings and facilities on Earth, such as hospitals, from resistant bacteria. We see Dragon here getting further and further from the space station and getting closer and closer to Earth. And meanwhile, while NASA astronaut Matt Dominic was up in orbit, he processed cardiac tissue samples for the Redwire cardiac bioprinting investigation. Since tissue samples are bioprinted in microgravity, they are higher quality than those printed on the ground. So the results from this investigation could help to advance the production of organs and tissues for transplant, and also improve 3D printing of foods and medicines on future long-duration space missions. And with that, we've received confirmation that we've just exited the approach ellipsoid. CREW-8, Dragon are on their way home. I'd be remiss not to talk about NASA astronaut Mike Barrett and what he did while he was in orbit. And he worked closely on an investigation called the Human Brain Organoid Models for Neurodegenerative Disease and Drug Discovery. And this investigation uses human brain organoids created with stem cells.
The vehicle has exited the approach ellipsoid and is on a safe free drift trajectory.
Great, we just heard that call out, and science will always continue to be front and center with various crews that spend their time aboard the orbiting laboratory. And when they splash down, they'll be extracted first, followed by some of that science I just discussed, and it'll be delivered to researchers on the ground. So while we may not be able to air after we exit the approach ellipsoid, we'll continue to provide periodic updates through our mission audio commentary on nasa.gov. So with that, I will take a moment and hand it back to Sandra and Jesse in Hawthorne.
Thanks so much, Nilofer. And as you mentioned, Dragon Endeavour has now exited the approach ellipsoid. You do see it there on your screen. It's that tiny little dot now. The approach ellipsoid is another imaginary shape. It's three-dimensional, measuring 4 kilometers by 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, and it's in the same family as the keep-out sphere. Now, one of the key differences with the approach ellipsoid is that vehicles outside it have to be in that 24-hour safe free drift trajectory, which we've discussed, which means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours, again, if for some reason all maneuvering was lost.
And with that, CREW-8 has officially departed the International Space Station. It will take them about 34 hours until they make their way back down home to Earth. The crew is currently doffing or removing their spacesuits to settle in for the ride home, and Dragon is targeted to splash down off the coast of Florida at 3:29 a.m. Eastern Time or 12:29 a.m. Pacific Time on Friday, October 25th, followed by the crew getting picked up at sea by a SpaceX recovery vessel. As they rest up, our teams here will continue to keep an eye on the weather to ensure a safe return for Dragon and our CREW-8 astronauts.
And though our coverage here in Hawthorne is wrapping up for today, we will turn it over to the NASA team in Houston to take us through the next phases of the CREW-8 mission. Our friends at the Johnson Space Center will provide continuous live audio-only coverage along CREW-8's journey home until we rejoin. You can find the audio-only link by visiting nasa.gov/live and clicking the mission audio link, or by searching for NASA Mission Audio Live feed on YouTube at go.nasa.gov/liveiss.
Meanwhile, we will rejoin for live visual coverage starting roughly 1 hour prior to splashdown. And as always, you can find mission updates on X at NASA, at SpaceX, and on the web at nasa.gov. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you and our CREW-8 astronauts very soon.
Nem falou, gente, nem porque vocês vão falar quando for 6h40. Eu iria colocar a câmera no foguete. Bem na hora que eu falei, uns minutos depois, a live
T-minus 14 minutes, 26 seconds and counting. At this point, second stage liquid oxygen should be flowing on board the Falcon 9's second stage. Seeing a bit more trail off venting than we do see sometimes following the conclusion primarily of the so-called big vent.
Gerencie sua equipe e distribua as tarefas como quiser com o Hanhanity. Quer ver as etapas? Use a visão Kanban. Precisa gerenciar a pauta e os prazos? Mude para o Gantt. Hanhanity, simples, flexível e fácil. Use grátis.
Now T-minus 12 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. This booster, tail number 1063, is getting ready to fly for an 18th time. So while we have time, let's go ahead and step through its flight record. First flew back on May 14th of 2022. That was the Starlink 4-15 mission adding 53 version 1.5 Starlink satellites to low Earth orbit. Next up was a C-band communications satellite for SES-22, that lifted off on June 29th. That was followed up by a pair of Starlink missions on August 10th. That was Starlink 4-26 and September 24th. That was Starlink 4-35. Those are followed by this booster's first lunar supporting mission, the launch of the Hakuto R mission lander, lifting off on December 11th. Followed up on February 7th of 2023, the 1073 launched the Amazonas Nexus satellite. This was a Spanish communication satellite for the company Hispasat, covers the Americas, Europe, and North Africa. Followed up by a mission to the International Space Station, the 27th commercial cargo flight, the ISS for SpaceX. CRS-27 lifting off on March 15th. Was followed by a series of Starlink missions. You had Starlink 6-2 on April 19th, 5-11 on June 12th, 6-12 on September 4th of 2023, 6-27 on November 8th, 6-37 on January 15th, coming into this year, and 6-41 on March 1st. Was followed up by the first mid-inclination orbit rideshare mission called Bandwagon 1, which launched on April 7th. Brought us back to Starlinks. We had Starlink 6-58 on May 13th, 8-9 on July 3rd, and most recently Starlink 10-7 on August 12th. Setting up for Starlink 6-61 getting ready to lift off today, assuming all continues to move well with this rocket. Speaking of the rocket, as we're currently T-minus 10 minutes, 16 seconds and counting, let's go ahead and talk about SpaceX's workhorse vehicle. Getting ready to launch in just a hair over 10 minutes. Stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Majority of that is made up by the Falcon 9's first stage. Just talked about that booster, 1073, flying for an 18th time today. The base of the first stage are 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs. They'll be used to land this booster on the drone ship, a shortfall gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core, which is surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right-hand side of your screen, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere tail first, like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Also, the second stage engine nozzle is housed safely within the inner stage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine, or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a nozzle that is optimized for burns in the vacuum of space, hence the name. If SpaceX doesn't need the full power of the upper stage, it can use a shorter nozzle, which is cheaper to manufacture. Upper stage produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust.
Tá, gente, tá
And on a
chovendo,
Starlink
hein,
mission,
gente?
they will use the long nozzle. MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix, that being RP1 and LOX, same as the first stage. Following spacecraft separation or deployment of the Starlink satellites, there will be a third burn, as a deorbit burn, helping to drive the upper stage back into the atmosphere, where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the rocket are the payload bearings, encapsulating the 23 Starlink satellites. Bearings are made up of a carbon composite material. They stand 13.1 meters, or 43 feet tall, and are 5.2 meters, or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 halves of the payload fairing will be recovered a little further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship, a shortfall gravitas. They will gently splash down under parachutes, like we showed you a little bit earlier in the broadcast. And SpaceX will use one of its recovery vessels to scoop them up, bring them back into Port Canaveral, offload them, drive them over to Cape Canaveral, where they will be refurbished and turned around for future flights. We're now T-minus 7 minutes, 3 seconds and counting. We are coming up on the engine chill-down sequence. That process, once again, for those who may not have been with us earlier in the broadcast, involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps and helps protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. As we continue on into these final handful of minutes of the count, want to thank the now more than 15,000 of you who are joining with us live. If you haven't already, we would certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. It allows the YouTube algorithm to recognize that you're here and active and bring this live coverage to a few more folks. We'd certainly appreciate that. I also want to thank Space Pony, one of our wonderful channel members, for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Really appreciate that, Space Pony. And to Debster for joining us, the channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard to Debster and to our newest 5 channel members as well. In addition, we're glad to have you all with us. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop that is shop.spaceflightnow.com. Access to member-only videos here on YouTube, and of course, the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments here at the Cape in 4K. Also want to quickly thank Space Pony for a $2 super chat. It's asking, how will I survive next year's launch numbers with a good amount of caffeine and hopefully getting sleep as much as I can. But in all seriousness, we will survive because we have a good and steady team here at Spaceflight Now that are all behind the mic, backing us up here. So not a solo venture, thank goodness. Now T-minus 4 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. Getting some views of the pad and mission audio from SpaceX. Should be hearing the call for Strongback retract.
Strongback lower has started.
Right on cue. Nice view of the crew access tower on the Falcon 9 against the backdrop of a setting sun. Peering through that crew access tower. Just a quick bit of housekeeping here. You'll notice our countdown clock in the upper right-hand corner of the screen, a little bit ahead of what you see there from SpaceX as the clamp arms are opening up. That's because our clock is in real time. What's coming through from the SpaceX feed is coming in on a slight delay. So for the first part of the coverage post liftoff, we'll be making our calls out based off of real time as those align with our actual tracking cameras here on the ground. Now T-minus 2 minutes, 47 seconds. The Falcon 9 first stage.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Load is, as I was just about to say, is just wrapping up. Next call we'll be hearing is for second stage LOX load. It's coming up in now less than 30 seconds. Now less than 2 minutes. Should hear the call for second stage LOX load being complete momentarily.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
And with that call, the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. What you're seeing here on your screen are the ground gas closeouts.
Gas launch closeouts has started.
Good call from SpaceX. Now just over a minute away to liftoff. We'll come back to comments from the live chat on the other side of liftoff, but with just about a minute to go, we're going to keep our focus here on the Falcon 9 rocket. T-minus 1 minute.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
With that call, control the ground, the countdown is handed over now to the ground sequencer, from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks being brought up to flight pressure. And with that go for launch, we are now just about 30 seconds away from the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. "20 seconds. 15 seconds. And here we go. In 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 6-61 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower.
Falar que nem o Sérgio. Ah, não sei. Não sei, esqueci.
Power and telemetry nominal.
Now a little more than a minute into flight. Some great tracking views from our team here around Florida's Space Coast.
Max Q.
A call from XQ, the Falcon 9 passing through the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. Coming upon a few events in fairly rapid succession. See first stage main engine cutoff at T plus 2 minutes 25 seconds. That'll be followed by stage separation a few seconds after that. The Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will ignite at T plus 2 minutes 36 seconds. The payload fairings will be deployed at about the 3-minute mark. That call you just heard from SpaceX, they are thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage in preparation for its ignition coming up here in less than 30 seconds. Coming up on MECO. Do you see Miko? A great view of stage separation from
Main engine
friend
cut
P.
off.
Carson's. And there you see ignition.
Stage separation confirmed. And back
Good
ignition.
views from the SpaceX onboard cameras and some excellent tracking today. Now going through a little bit of cloud from that camera vantage point. Fortunately, we've got other members of our team spread out around Florida Space Coast. Good view of the payload fairing deployment.
Fairing separation confirmed.
See that from the onboard cameras there. The Starlink satellites on this mission now exposed to the vacuum of space for the first time on this flight. Some good views from Chuck and Jen Briggs, seeing both the upper stage and the Falcon booster, as well as the payload fairings reflecting the sun. Really nice views here today. Now a little more than 4 minutes into flight. We're less than 2 minutes away from the next milestone, which is the first stage entry burn. That burn's set to last about 24 seconds in total. Still getting some good views of the Falcon 9 upper stage. A little hard to track with the wind today, but this view coming from P. Carson's with Max Q Productions. At the time of day as well, the onboard cameras from the Falcon 9 first and second stages are really quite something. Now coming up on 5 minutes into flight. Less than a minute is when the entry burn is set to begin. We may or may not be able to see it from the ground with our tracking cameras. If we do, we'll of course bring those views to you. T plus 6 minutes and counting. Entry burn should be underway in real time.
Stage 1 FTS is saved. Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Entry burn may just be in the wrong position in the sky as compared to our tracking cameras to be able to catch it. That burn will have wrapped up by now. In real time, that is, you're seeing it from the SpaceX feed coming in on a slight delay.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
Good call on the conclusion of the entry burn. That sets up the Falcon 9 first stage booster to start its landing burn coming up at about T plus 7 minutes, 44 seconds. And a first stage landing on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas, about 8 minutes and 13 seconds post liftoff. Less than 30 seconds away from the landing burn beginning. Those puffs that you've been seeing in between the hypersonic grid fins on the Falcon first stage booster are the cold gas thrusters. Those help to adjust the attitude or the position of the Falcon 9 first stage booster.
Stage 2 FTS is saved.
As it makes its way towards the drone ship. Flight termination system for the FTS has been saved, as you just heard. No longer needed at this stage in flight. And the Falcon 9 first stage traveling below the speed of sound.
Stage 1 landing burn.
That landing burn underway. We should get some views of the drone ship coming up momentarily.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
And for an 18th time, booster 1073 is safely down on the drone ship.
And back shutdown.
And with that, we are now T plus 9 minutes, 14 seconds, and counting into this mission. Coming up next will be the reignition of the Merlin vacuum engine at T plus 54 minutes and 5 seconds. There'll be a brief 1-second burn to circularize the orbit. And the Starlink satellites will be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 5 minutes, and 13 seconds. With a good liftoff and landing of that first stage booster, we're going to go ahead and turn momentarily to our mission stats as they currently stand, but do want to thank a few folks in the live chat for your support this afternoon. Cruised on into the evening. Our thanks to Sulfur for Lunch for a 100 SEK super chat. Really appreciate that, Sulfur. It says Spaceflight Now rocks. It's very kind of you. Ryan Snyder with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Ryan. Saying thank you, Spaceflight Now team. Appreciate your support of what we do here. Let's see, I have the $2 super chat. Saying from Bob the Bugman. Appreciate you for that. And also for joining us with channel membership at the Pad Leader level. Patty Chichil, one of our pre-existing channel members with a $5 super chat. Thank you, Patty. Good to see you tonight. It says, watching in my car. Thank you, Spaceflight Now. And the mods, always great job. And last but certainly not least, big thank you to another one of our wonderful channel members, Beverly Knuckles, for gifting 10 Spaceflight Now memberships. Thank you so much, Beverly. And to our newest 10 channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. And be sure to thank Beverly in the live chat if you haven't already. And thanks as well to Leonardo Dominguez for a $2 super chat. Thanks for your support tonight, Leonardo. Turning now to our mission stats as they currently stand. This particular launch marked the 18th flight of the Falcon 9 booster, tail number 1073 in the SpaceX fleet. This was the 384th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 99th Falcon 9 launch of 2024. This was the 329th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 104th launch of the year, including 2 Falcon Heavy missions and 3 Starship flights. This was the 121st SpaceX orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 211th from Pad 40 for SpaceX, and the 266th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Currently 101 total Falcon launches on the year. A little typo at the top of that should be October 23rd. Of course, we're couple delays with this mission. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was the 82nd landing on the drone ship of Shortfall of Gravitas. That marked the 280th SpaceX drone ship landing and the 357th overall booster landing for SpaceX. Finally, with some industry stats, this marked the 72nd orbital launch from the Sunshine State. Pause to note here, this ties the total number of launches completed from Florida in all of 2023. So one more and we break the record. And of course, being that it's only late October, we will more than just beat it by the time year's out. Still plenty of time for a number of missions to go up from here on Florida's Space Coast. This mission marked the 108th orbital launch from U.S. soil, the 118th from U.S. rocket company this year, and the 194th orbital launch from around the world. With 6 orbital launch failures so far this year, here's where the pie chart currently stands. U.S. holding 61% of that pie. China with 51 launches on the year now. They had one this morning. They hold 26% of the pie. Russia, with its 11 launches, has 6%. Go to Japan, who's launched 5 times. Iran and India, 3 apiece. European Space Agency with 2. And North Korea with 1 orbital launch attempt and failure. Now 14 plus minutes into this mission, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up tonight. But if you haven't had your fill of launch activity for the week, don't have to wait too much longer. We do have on tap another Falcon 9 rocket, which will be their 100th of the year, assuming that remains on track and on schedule. That is NROL 167, launching from Vandenberg Space Force Base. That is coming up tomorrow at 1713 UTC. This is another batch of their so-called proliferated architecture, what are believed to be the Starshield satellites manufactured by SpaceX, partnership with Northrop Grumman. And then bringing things back here to Florida Space Coast, we're looking for a weekend launch of the Starlink 10-8 mission. Also looking to lift off from this particular pad, Slick 40. And with that, we're going to go ahead and close things out. One last peek at the live chat here. I want to thank Marla Plunk, one of our wonderful channel members, for a $10 super chat. Thank you, Marla, for supporting us. Who says, always tune in to Spaceflight Now for launches. Couldn't have said it better myself. Also want to welcome the lone solipsist for joining us, the channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome in, Lone. Glad to have you with us. If you'd like to continue keeping your eyes on Pad 40 for just a hair longer after we wrap up this broadcast, you can check it out over on Launchpad Live. Well, you'll always be able to see pad views of 39A and what's going on down at Starbase over on Launchpad Live 24/7. Those Starbase views brought to you courtesy of our friends at Lab Padre. I want to thank our friends Chuck and Jen Briggs with C&J Images, Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions for helping us track the Falcon 9 rocket tonight. Also want to thank our photographers Adam Bernstein, Michael Kane, for getting some great snaps as well. You can check those out. We'll have them posted on our X account, simply at Spaceflight Now. You can also follow their work. Michael's at MD Kane Jr., Adam at Aburn NYC. Thanks as always to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. But most importantly, thanks to you for wherever you happen to be watching from. If you've made it all the way to the end of the broadcast, congratulations. Thanks for hanging in. Be sure to subscribe to Spaceflight Now on your way out the digital door. Give this video a like so for folks that weren't able to join with us live, they can find this as a live launch replay at their convenience or your convenience if you want to come back and watch it again at your leisure. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.